Good afternoon and welcome to the Annual General Meeting of the company. My name is Maxwell Pack, Chairman of the Board of Directors, and it's now noon, the time appointed for the AGM. May I introduce my board colleagues, Christopher Burrows, Roderick Whitlock, Pippa Latham and Patrick Reeve. Also present is Will Fraser-Allen, Managing Partner of Albion Capital, the company's investment manager. Will be giving a presentation on the results of the company for the year ended 31st of March 22. The quorum for the AGM is 2 members, and this has been met, and therefore I declare the meeting open. The notice convening the meeting has been in your hands for the statutory period, so I'll take the notice as read. Due to the success of last year's webcast meeting, in order to maximise the engagement of all members, the board have acquired the services of Lumi to broadcast this year's AGM, which enables members to participate fully in the meeting, which includes interacting during a question and answer session, as well as voting on the proposed resolutions. Before we move on to Will's presentation, the next part is procedural. The resolutions will all be voted on by way of a poll, taking into consideration votes already received by proxy voters that have been verified by the registrar. If you've already completed and submitted a proxy prior to the meeting, you don't need to vote again, unless you wish to change your vote. I now declare the poll open. The list of resolutions will automatically appear on your screen. You have 3 options for each resolution. You can vote for the resolution, against the resolution, or you may withhold your vote. Please select the option that corresponds with how you wish to vote. Once you've selected your vote, the option will change colour and a confirmation message will appear to indicate your vote has been cast and received. There's no submit button. To vote on all resolutions displayed, select the vote all option at the top of the screen. If you want to change your vote, reselect your choice. To cancel your vote, select the cancel button. Now moving to the main business of the meeting. Following the manager's presentation, the directors and manager are happy to answer questions from members about the presentation or the proposed AGM resolution as time permits. I'd like to thank members who've already submitted their questions and queries through to the chairman's email address. If you wish to ask questions, please select the messaging icon from within the navigation bar and type your question at the top of the screen. To submit your question, click on the arrow icon to the right of the text box. Depending on the level of questions, there may not be sufficient time to address all the questions raised during the meeting. However, please be assured that all relevant questions and their corresponding answers will be responded to and posted on the Albion website as appropriate. I'll now hand over to Will Fraser-Allen for his presentation.
Max, thank you very much. And a big welcome to all our shareholders watching this virtually. So, as Maxwell said, I'm planning to go through the results for the year to 31 March 2022. And if we move on to the next slide, you'll see that I'm going to cover the highlights in the year, talk about portfolio, a bit on strategy, ESG, and then looking forward to prospects and also the Q1 results, which we have just announced this morning. So if we move to the next slide, we'll pick out the main financial highlights, which was a particularly strong year, as these numbers show. Net asset value is now sitting at 132.28p, but really importantly, the year's return of 20.74% increased shareholders' value by 23.77p. So a very strong year, reflecting a lot going on in the portfolio, and I'll give you more colour to this in a moment. We were able to pay out a dividend, which is tax-free, of 6.09p, and you'll recall that that is in line with our dividend policy, which is to pay out approximately 5% a year, which is calculated as 2.5% of each half-year NAV numbers. Moving to the next slide, I want to set a little bit of context of where we are. We do live in somewhat interesting times, And if we look back over the last year and a little bit to current, what we're seeing is COVID-19 around, but less of an issue than in previous years. But that has been replaced by significant uncertainty as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which I'm afraid has significantly increased geopolitical risk, but has also had a profound effect on the macroeconomic outlook. So we are seeing eye-wateringly high inflation, which appears to be more persistent than initially thought, and that is inevitably leading to increased interest rates, which in turn has an impact on a negative impact on valuations of technology generally. Having said that, despite the portfolio in the year we are talking about here, those headwinds towards the end of the year were more than countered by some very successful uplifts. And I think that is largely due to the fact that we very much, in terms of the types of companies we invest in, look for businesses that have really mission critical products. So, for example, software that enterprises must use, and we believe that sort of focus on mission critical products and services in itself is a driver of some resilience. But I will go on and talk a bit more about the more immediate results towards the end of this presentation. So we'll go to the next slide. We'll just put some numbers in terms of where the company's performance is over 1, 3, 5, and 10 years, and a 10-year return of 11.7% is well above our target 5% dividend flow, and a decent chunk was driven by a very strong year last year, just under 21%. But if we move on to the next slide, we can break down that return by looking first at the highlights, but then the actual drivers of it. So in terms of fundraising, we were able to raise 21.5 million. That was strong fundraising, reflecting the fact the company is larger and the opportunities for investment. We also had a decent run of exits, delivering prices about 10.2%, and I'll go through those exits in a moment. We continue to be significant investors in UK innovative and high growth companies, and investing some 2.8 million into 6 new companies, and we supported our portfolio to the tune of 6.2 million. And that is an important theme, the ability to continue to support those companies, not only with the initial investment, but as they grow and require capital to scale. Share buybacks broadly the same year on year, 1.8 million, but the strong return generated a performance fee to the manager of 1.9 million, reflecting the very strong returns, and dividends paid out of 4.5 million per my earlier slide. Next slide, please. So let's dig a bit deeper into what has actually driven that very strong return. And it's really, the theme here really is valuation uplifts in the existing portfolio, but also some decent exits. So Quantexa, Aviva and Egress all had strong growth, either because of external fundraisings in form of Quantexa or Aviva, or in terms of trading growth in the case of Egress. Credit Kudos, MyMeds, decent sales, but inevitably in a venture portfolio, not all businesses can necessarily perform to that level, and with that we had a write down at Consurus on the back of slow trading. And then behind that, as you would expect, there were lots of ups and downs, and but those are all detailed in the annual report if you want to look into detail. But as you can see, it's across a large number of companies, but very much the predominance of write-ups rather than write-downs. Moving to the next slide. Many of you will be familiar with this slide. It's a useful way of us keeping track of how the portfolio is made up. And it's remarkable how little change there is year on year. So you've got the current year, you've got the 31st March number, and then the previous year. And you can see that the allocation to software is very similar. Fintech has gone up a bit. renewable energy has come down, and that's largely because of it's a fixed allocation, which against a larger company, and then healthcare are identical. Cash is worth commenting on. We do have cash at 32%. That does reflect both a successful fundraising last year, but also some realized exits. And that's not a bad place to be at a time of uncertainty, at a time when we will need to continue to support our businesses. But also, it's not a bad thing to have when there are some really interesting opportunities that are emerging out of the environment that we currently work in. So what does the portfolio look like in aggregate? It's about 53 companies, so very diversified, and employing over 3,600 people, and those are predominantly UK jobs. Next slide, please. This is another way of looking at portfolio, and we use this as a measure just to give both us and shareholders a sense of the relative stage of investments. So, are they how exposed are we to very young companies, which are likely to be more volatile than some of the larger companies? And what we're looking to do over time is to grow businesses. I'm pleased to see here that that's very much being achieved, whether you look at it in terms of revenues on the left or number of employees on the right. So if you take businesses with revenues over 5 million, being those companies in the process of scale up, now 76% by value is attributable to companies of that stage of development, up from 60% last year. And if you look at it in terms of employees, and you'll see that the very early stage companies, under 20 employees, are really quite small. We're down currently at a percentage point, with 23% between 20 and 50. Not focusing too heavily on the number of employees, because it's very important that we continue to invest in early stage companies, because it's those early stage companies that over time grow and develop and become the more significant companies in the portfolio. So a very diversified portfolio by number of companies, but also a helpful diversification across stage, i.e. maturity. Next slide, please. So these are the top 3 investments in the portfolio, and it's an important slide because they do account for 29% of the net asset value of the company as at 31st of March. So this is not untypical in a thriving venture portfolio, where a really important driver of returns is making sure you back your winners so that those outliers come through. Now, what this is showing is that you've got 34 million in those 3 companies. I'm going to go through the lot rather than the order they're on here. I'm going to go in terms of size and current book value. So you've got Quantexa, which is our business which, through using sophisticated data analytics, allows banks and others to analyze their data. So banks use it particularly for detecting financial crime, and it is now some of its customers are some of the largest banks in the world. We've got Egress, which is our email encryption platform. So clearly, cyber is such a huge issue at the moment that this Egress is doing critical work in ensuring that many institutions, including local authority, the NHS, and many others, are able to communicate through email securely, but also transfer data securely and encrypted. And then finally, Pravica, very much in our healthcare portfolio, is a pediatric medicines business. So that's turning medicines that are currently used in adults, getting them reformulated and then relicensed for the use with children. And in return, they are granted a license to sell across Europe. Next slide, please. Lots of new investments. I'll just sort of touch on these briefly, but it just it sort of shows the range of sorts of businesses that we're doing. So whether it's PerchPeak, that's using a platform to help companies with relocating staff across the world. So a really painful area for people as they move. And what PerchPeak is doing is digitalizing that, providing a very effective platform which allows far more relocating staff to be supported in their relocation. Gravity, I'll go into a bit more detail in a minute. And Nouveau Air, bright light uses GPUs, graphical processing units, to run more powerful database. Excelx is all around helping fund managers, particularly supporting alternative assets, to extract data as part of their reporting. And then Regulatory Genome is using machine readable content to help compliance, so effectively providing a repository and highly usable compliance support. New slide, please. Next slide, please. So this Gravity is a new investment very much in our core area of enterprise software. And what this is doing is helping companies manage their application programming interfaces. That's API. And think of APIs as what glues lots of different bits of software together. It's effectively the sort of rails on which IT systems are built. And they've come up with a next generation way for companies to manage those APIs, keep them up to date, make them more efficient. So we invested 4 million as part of a 8.8 million round. And it's very much focused on expanding into the US and also developing their product. Next slide, please. Nouveau Air, again, this is very much in the healthcare area. This is using a digital platform to help with the treatment, particularly of asthma and cystic fibrosis. That's really not only in sort of clinical setting, but they are also able to use the platform, which is connected to a bit of hardware called a spirometer, which is the thing that you breathe into to measure breath rate. And they are able to provide that to clinical trials, particularly in respiratory drugs. But more importantly, it enables the treatment going forward of in a clinical setting. And it, as the first bullet point shows, this very much came of age in COVID, when cystic fibrosis patients were just unable to go into a clinical setting. And then what we've seen as a general theme is that healthcare systems are very much adopting this telehealthcare approach of being able to provide monitoring and treatment outside the clinic. Next slide, please. Some follow-ons. Follow-ons are critical, so 6.2 million of follow-ons. Some examples would be Aviva, which is again another digital health platform in the area. It's supporting diabetics around diet. Teeth, which is all around collecting data in clinical trials. And then Transfic is very much in our fintech focus, which in that helps financial institutions link into trading platforms, for example, the trading of fixed income. Next slide, please. Some nice exits in the year, and it's really important that we do have a decent flow of exits. It's from those realizations that we fund dividends. Credit Kudos was sold to a very large global company, which I can't disclose on grounds of confidentiality, but very large. And that was an interesting business, which was a new style of credit referencing agency. And interesting how quickly value can be created when you back cutting edge technology. So we were only in that business for 2 years. The 500,000 invested by Enterprise increased by 5.2 times in that 2-year period. Next slide, please. Frazee was a marketing software business sold to Keyhaven, who are a private equity house. And again, that was all around helping companies particularly manage their email campaigns. Again, we invested there for 3.5 years, so not a hugely long time, but in that period we delivered 2.7 million of proceeds, which represented a 3.2 times multiple. So a decent multiple in a relatively short period of time. Moving to the next slide. And then MyMed. So this falls into a different category. This is an example of a 9-year investment hold. So this is where we've backed a business for a significant period of time as it's grown and developed. And this was a platform that allows particularly big pharma to record adverse events when drugs are in market or around regulatory reporting. And that was sold for proceeds of 2.4 million, which was a 3.4 times return. So those are three respectable, decent, and in the credit kudos, actually a very significant exit and an important driver in that return for the year. Moving to the next slide. Just a reminder of our investment strategy. So we invest early, so predominantly early stage, and then we sort of back those businesses as they grow, and that's very much through the follow-on funding. And what we're looking to do is to back very long-term trends, software, healthcare, and then areas such as automation. So our focus is very, very much business to business. We minimize our exposure to the consumer, and that's an important driver to reduce volatility in more difficult times like now. And we can expect real pressure on the consumer over the coming months. So this focus on business to business is all about sort of creating an all-weather resilient portfolio. And if we move to the next slide, I will touch on ESG, which is core to how we work. So the fact that investing in businesses that have positive environmental and societal impact in turn leads to long-term sustainable and successful investments. So we've integrated ESG very much into our approach, both in how we select investments, how we do investments, and how we work with those companies once we're invested. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see how that is integrated the whole way through, from when we screen them in the first place, when we do our due diligence. We're looking at how those businesses are, where those businesses are in their ESG journey, and we're very much looking to help those businesses, support those businesses as they develop their ESG credentials over time. And that's not only because it creates valuable, sustainable investments, but it's an important part of ensuring a business is attractive to a buyer, which is likely to be a large global technology company themselves, having very developed and sophisticated ESG strategies. We're then able to, through our monitoring of those investments, through being involved at board level, we're able to help build ESG initiatives within the businesses. And also, importantly, we're collecting information, because what we want to do is understand and quantify what is inherently certain, which is that strong ESG leads to better outcomes. And then when we follow on, we put more money into the companies, we're able to use that as an opportunity to encourage companies to move their ESG strategy forward. And then it's down to that exit, making sure that we exit to those companies that have good ESG practices themselves. You know, we're not pushing on a closed door. Our entrepreneurs, we back our management teams, are absolutely on the same page. But what we're doing here is supporting them in that development journey. And if we go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about what we here at Albion are doing, because clearly it's very important to my team and to our approach here. So we are looking at our carbon footprint. We are working towards net zero, but in the first instance, we're looking to offset our carbon emissions through backing biochar carbon removal, which is effectively charcoal that's absorbed carbon out of the atmosphere. And then we're working within our own sort of local area on initiatives, litter picking being the one that we most recently done. But we're also looking to make our own business more diverse. We're looking at how we can support, recruit, and encourage those from different backgrounds, both looking at gender, but also looking at ethnicity. Future VC is an organisation that provides us with internships, and this is aimed at people who would not normally have considered venture capital as a career, and we're looking to help them through paid internships. And we are very focused on who we back, so making sure that we are giving sufficient focus to female founded and led businesses, and there's a investing in women code, which is government backed and is actually being proven very effective to measure and helping us to place more emphasis and more focus on this important area of supporting female founders and leaders. ESG is very much on the minds of our boards, and to that regard, we regularly update ESG, where we're getting to on our ESG journey with the boards at the various board meetings through the year. And then beyond that, we are working with the broader VC industry to encourage this practice more widely. Turn to the next slide. So where are we? It's clearly the world has changed. You know, we do have this macroeconomic and geopolitical uncertainty that I referred to in my opening remarks. You know, having said that, you know, we do believe our portfolio is well balanced, and we do think this focus on mission critical products and services, particularly software and healthcare, is designed to provide that resilience. But and then lastly, the key point again is not being exposed to the consumer. That having said that, clearly there are headwinds. Clearly valuations are under pressure, and we would expect rather less M&A activity, so fewer exits in the current year. But against that, it brings opportunities, and we are seeing a particularly strong pipeline of new and further investments from within our portfolio, driven by opportunities that are driven by the economic climate. Next slide, please. So how has that played out? And this is the IMS that's just been announced, which does show a small fall in NAV of 1.66%. So NAV is now at 130.2p, but that is in the context of a 20% return last year. We have continued to make new investments and follow-on investments. So, you know, it is, I'm afraid, a more muted environment in which we're operating, but we feel well placed in terms of weathering the times that we live in. Just a couple of, as you will have seen today, we're continuing to do virtual AGMs. We found them extremely effective over the last 2 years in terms of getting greater engagement with our shareholders. So as well as those that attend virtually, we're also seeing very large uptake of people watching the AGMs, which we post on our website, including our Q&A, and we're seeing far higher interactions with shareholders as a result. But we do recognise the importance to shareholders and to us of meeting up with shareholders. So we are placing an even greater emphasis on our annual shareholder event, which is on the 23rd of November. It's at the Royal College of Surgeons in Lincoln's Inn Field. And I very much encourage people to reserve a place. Inevitably, places are limited. So if you would like to come, please contact us at our website, info@albion.capital. And conversely, if you then find you are unable to come for whatever reason, it'd be very helpful if you could let us know so that we can give others the opportunity to come. And then finally, the first dividend of the year has been announced. So that will be 3.31p, and that will be paid to shareholders on the 31st of August 2022. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I'll now be handing back to Max.
Thank you, Will. I'd like to add my personal congratulations to you and your team for delivering such an excellent set of results. I'll now deal with the questions that have been received via the Lumi platform. Will, for you, from Roger, congratulations for the excellent figure of unrealised gains of 17.2 million for the year. I note that the first half figure was 15.6 million, so the second half figure was 1.6 million. What conclusions should I draw between the different figures in the 2 half years? Well,
I think partly it is a matter of timing of when particular transactions happen, but I think actually the slide, my prospect slide, provide the other half of the answer, which is that the world did become more uncertain. We saw valuations of technology companies starting to fall in about September last year. So actually, before the Ukraine crisis, but accelerated by the Ukraine crisis. So your observation is right, that there was a slowdown in the second half, and my slide on prospects and the results for the first quarter show that has continued.
Thank you, Will. And from Anthony, are you able to give a date for this year's coming fundraising?
So at the moment the board is sort of considering its options, and we're going through a process of establishing what the right amount of a fundraising would be. And we hope to be in a position in the coming weeks to announce the fundraising plans in more detail.
Thank you, Will. I guess that having an excellent set of results means that you get very few questions, and that does actually complete the list of questions that we have from shareholders. I would encourage you, though, to add any questions to the chairman's email, which we're referring to later. Any questions that you have. We're very, very keen on getting shareholder participation, and so we'll always try and answer the questions that you raise to us. So we will now continue with the formal business of the AGM. The full text of each of the resolutions was set out in the notice of the meeting, and the board is recommending members to vote in favour of all the resolutions. I will briefly summarise the resolutions. The first is to receive and adopt the company's accounts for the year ended 31st of March 2022, together with the strategic report and the reports of the directors and auditor. The second is to approve the directors' remuneration report for the year ended 31st of March 2022. The third is the election of Pippa Latham as the director of the company. The fourth is my re-election as director of the company. The fifth is the re-election of Christopher Burrows as director of the company. And the sixth is the re-election of Patrick Reeve as director of the company. The seventh resolution is the re-election of Roderick Whitlock as director of the company. And the eighth resolution is the reappointment of BDO LLP as auditor of the company to hold office from the conclusion of the meeting to the conclusion of the next meeting at which the accounts are to be laid. The ninth resolution is to authorise the directors to agree the auditor's remuneration, and the 10th is to allow the directors to allot shares. The penultimate resolution is a special resolution that will give the directors the power to disapply preemption rights. The final resolution, which again is a special resolution, is to authorise the company to make one or more market purchases of ordinary shares in the capital of the company. The results of the voting, including the proxy votes in each of the resolutions, will be announced after the meeting through a regulatory information service and published on Albion's website as soon as reasonably practicable. For those members that have cast their vote, I confirm that all the poll has now concluded, and I can now declare the poll closed. In the meantime, I'll show on the screen the current proxy votes that have been received by the registrar. As you will note, the proxy votes are comfortably in favour of the proposed resolutions. Thank you. That concludes the formal business of the AGM. As I said earlier, I'd like to thank all members who have joined the webcast. As I mentioned, the board welcomes any feedback you may have, which you can do by sending an email to aavchair@albion.capital. For those of you who are interested in seeing the list of questions and their corresponding answers, these should be available shortly, along with a recording of the AGM on the Albion Capital website. There being no further business, I declare the meeting closed, and we wish you a healthy and happy rest of the summer. Thank you all very much for attending.